Good afternoon, folks. Can you hear me up at the back? Super, thank you. My name is Richard Harrison. Welcome. I am Director of Community Engagement at Regent High School. I'm also Chair of the Board of Trustees of Camden Spark, which is another KQ partner. I'm on the board of the KQ, and as you'll find out as we go on today, I'm also on the team helping to develop some STEAM learning across Camden. That acronym will become more obvious to you in a few minutes. But really, I'm the kind of insignificant member of this panel because we've got some absolutely phenomenal people here. I'm going to give some quick introductions. We've got Kate Barry, who is an assistant principal at the UCL Academy, which is one of Camden's family of schools. And Kate helps to lead the STEAM Hub, amongst many other things. Dinah Caine, who is the chair of the STEAM Commission. And we will explain a little bit more about what that involves. And then 3 sixth form students from Regent High School who I will ask to introduce themselves in a minute. I'll just say a little bit more about Kate first of all, though. She, believe it or not, has been teaching for over 15 years and has been head of science and a senior leader in schools in Camden and abroad. Kate is now the assistant principal for curriculum at UCL, and that's in part because Kate has an interest in curriculum design, and the work that we've been doing through the STEAM Hub picks up on Kate's passion for curriculum design that enables students to activate their knowledge through challenging interdisciplinary learning opportunities. And as I say, Kate helps to co-lead the STEAM Hub. Can we give Kate a round of applause? Dinah Caine, CBE, is the chair of Camden's STEAM Commission. The Commission's report, Creating Camden's 21st Century Talent, which you can download from the Camden website, so just Google STEAM Commission and you get the report in full, explores how schools and businesses can work together more closely so Camden's young people can benefit better from the world-leading organisations in their neighbourhood, recommending that, this is the important bit, recommending that a fusion of creative, scientific and digital skills, i.e. a STEAM approach, is needed. Dinah is the chair of the Governing Council at Goldsmiths, one of the University of London colleges, and former CEO and chair of Creative Skillset. She's a member of the Creative Industries Council and a member of the Skills Commission. Can we give Dinah a round of applause? To my left, we have 3 Year 12 students from Regent High School, Abass, Labib and Sayra, and I'm going to ask them, in not very typical conference style, to just say a little bit about themselves. Abass.
I'm Abass, of course, as I said. I study 4 A-levels, chemistry, biology, maths and psychology. I'm in year 12. Next year I'm going to be in year 13. And then after my A-levels I want to go to university in London, maybe UCL Imperial, study engineering.
So if there are any admissions tutors from UCL or Imperial in the room, please remember Abass's name. Labib?
Hi, my name's Labib. I'm a sixth form student in year 12. I'm currently studying maths, biology and psychology, but I'm looking to restart and do more passionate subjects next year, which would be English Lit, history and economics. After year 13, I'm looking to go into university or take an apprenticeship route that is, that has levels equivalent to, that work up to degree level. And then I'm also looking to, if I was to go to university, I'm looking to go into law or writing.
Thank you.
I'm Sayra, as mentioned. I'm currently studying biology, psychology and history. However, I plan to redo year 12 by studying psychology, history and English Lit, simply because I just like it a bit more. And after year 13, I'm hoping to go to King's for their behavioural psychology programme and end up in either counselling or rehabilitation.
Can we give the students a round of applause? And I think I'd like to mention that it takes absolute guts to be able to say at the end of year 12, actually, I'd like to redo this. This wasn't quite the right set of subjects for me. So I have huge respect for the fact that these guys can say to us, can we restart year 12, put themselves a year behind chronologically, but so that their interest is to the maximum, and hopefully that will come across in what they then go on to do in the future. I'm going to, at this point, hand over to Dinah to kick us off with some thoughts around today's topic. We're thinking of how young people can be the future of knowledge and how a STEAM approach, so science, technology, engineering, arts and maths, although we've already been discussing about how porous that can be, but certainly the STEAM acronym, how that approach can support our young people to engage with knowledge production, knowledge dissemination, and to change the face of knowledge as perhaps we know it today. Dinah.
Thank you, Richard. And hi, everybody. It's great to see you all here. Thank you very much for choosing this session. Richard's explained what the purpose of the STEAM Commission was. We started our work in 2016 and published our report in June 2017 and launched it at Google. And the reason I say that is obviously Google is one of those great big skyscraper glass, big employers that sits right in the middle of Camden and is very much about combining and needing the skills of the future. And one of the things that we were looking at very much in terms of the commission was whether or not what was happening in schools in Camden was actually matching and delivering what that future world of work looked like, what the future mixes of skills were going to be, and whether or not what was being delivered was bringing those two together in as positive a way as we could. And our reflections was, the answer to that was no, really. And the reason for that is many. But I think that, one of the top level issues that we have to face and recognise at the moment is that in many ways, I would argue skills and education policy in this country has been based very strongly on 20th century notions of employment and employment practice, and is measured still, those in higher education will know this, measured still very much by earnings-related data that relate to the jobs of now, not the jobs of tomorrow. And basically, in terms of the industrial strategy, as Richard said, I sit on the Creative Industries Council and lead on skills and education for them. It's becoming more and more apparent that the mix of what people actually needed and what employers were saying was needed for them to flourish and grow, both individually, but for those businesses to flourish and grow, and therefore society and so on, was actually a fusion, a much more interdisciplinary melding of creativity, of science, technology, technical. STEAM's a really difficult word. Everybody debates. Honest to God, we spent so much time on the STEAM Commission deciding on whether or not we should be called the STEAM Commission. I can't tell you. It's not perfect, but at the moment it's the one that everybody's using, whilst knowing probably something else might be a bit better. Anyway, STEAM, that mixing of those disciplines with critically entrepreneurship as well, because the whole way of working in terms of portfolio, in terms of small businesses, in terms of startups, in terms of not jobs for life. I mean, goodness me, you're all from the knowledge quarter. I don't have to tell you this. You all know it, you live it, you breathe it. So that was one thing. What could we do? What was going on at schools? And it's very, very difficult. Primary schools, it's easier to bring in that cross-disciplinary approach. Secondary schools, particularly in England, for all the reasons that we know, in terms of the national curriculum, in terms of funding cuts around what's possible to do extracurricularly, becoming more and more squeezed in terms of the ability to actually introduce some form of interdisciplinarity into the system, which allowed people to get that melding of subjects, which is the triangle that we feel is very much going to be needed in terms of that future of work. So that was one key driver, and that driver needed to bring together employers, and it needed to bring together the council, and it needed to bring together schools, FE, HE. The other one, of course, was actually diversity, and today's all about democratizing knowledge. And effectively, interestingly, I'd go back to my 20th century employment practices, because the way in which work is developing very much both in the new and in the old is increasingly relying, I think, on networks, on who you know, not necessarily what you know, and certainly in terms of the accessing of more interdisciplinary subjects easier to obtain at independent private schools than it is within the state system at the moment. And so what you're seeing is a kind of ever-growing separation and an ever-growing, I would say, ability for people to navigate the new world of work through that private system than actually necessarily through the state system. And certainly within that, the need to then ensure that we are connecting with communities, accessing everybody to those opportunities and ensuring that everybody has the ability to navigate and to learn in ways that will ensure their future and harness their brilliance to our society and to our local economy. And really in Camden, if we can't work that out, then, you know, as I always say, where can we? We have a combination of all of those industries actively here, employing here, with headquarters here in a lot of places, but a really vibrant SME community, micro-enterprise community as well. And obviously, in terms of the Knowledge Quarter, which goes across the border to Islington, it has to be said, but it's a very porous border. The Knowledge Quarter, in and of itself, and the members of the Knowledge Quarter, absolutely exemplify that as well. So, 2 years on, it's been a huge exercise in terms of actually bringing lots of different interests together, because this is about networking, collaboration, and innovation, which is another set of values that the Knowledge Quarter has. And, you know, that's no small feat. And it's required partnership within different subsets that we've had to bring together as well as across. So if I say to you now, our report was launched in June 2016. 2019, we now have, as you're about to hear, the fantastic work of the Hub, which has brought 21 schools together in its first period of work, primary, secondary, the FE college and specialist schools. And we're just about to go into the second phase, which will be bringing another of the 20 schools of the 61 in Camden. So that'll be 2/3 of the schools in Camden working through the Hub, which you're going to hear more about. We've now got 60 employers working actively as STEAM ambassadors with schools in Camden. We've got how many employers involved, Danielle? Sorry. 40 employers. We were working on our pilot, 40 employers with those 20 schools. And so, for example, in terms of our Camden Summer University and Camden Challenge, which is the STEAM one, last year it's a week-long thing with Ted Baker. Now we've got 5 companies working with schools. So we've gone up from 15 students to 80 on that. And we're really now at a pivot turning point. Turning point is a pivot, isn't it? Anyway, so what we want and what we need, as well as sharing all of our experience, is actually really active commitment from members of the Knowledge Quarter. I think mostly all of the organisations involved will have values that talk about inclusion, we'll talk about diversity, we'll talk about community, we'll talk about involving all of society in the work that they do in various ways. And I say, what better way to start that than to start within your own local areas. So we would love you to join the work. We would love you to be involved with that, not just in terms of your presence in this area, but also because of your thought leadership nationally and internationally, your ability to network, connect, proselytise, and to really work with us on what is trailblazing work in this country and work that needs to be shared and networked, so that we see this as the start of a movement and the beginning of something which changes the mix of what we do in this country at a time, my God, when we never, ever, ever more need to be thinking about that and thinking about our futures as opposed to the awfulness of Brexit. Thank you.
Thank you. Gosh, wasn't that rousing? We'll speak a little bit later about why that approach is useful and relevant to the future that these guys will be inheriting. So just have a think. We'll open up to the floor in a wee bit. So if you've got questions or you want to throw in some ideas, we will come to you. But we're going to hear from Kate a little bit more about the STEAM Hub, which is really quite a different way of working for schools. It's not always possible in a local authority area for schools to come together, and Camden wants to challenge that and bring us together and make us learn from one another. So Kate's going to give us some more information about the work that we've been doing this last academic year.
Great, yeah, so I'm Kate Barry and I'm Assistant Principal at UCL Academy, and we teach a connected curriculum. We're sponsored by UCL, and their approach to knowledge is through their interdisciplinary learning and the fusion of knowledge and skills under their grand challenges. They have 6 grand challenges a year. They might be global health or transformative technology, cultural understanding. And as a school, we take those grand challenges and we design our big ideas or our driving questions to support students to activate their knowledge and prevent it from being inert, and allow them to have fusion of their knowledge and skills where it's appropriate, so they can practice transferring and using it to solve problems more creatively. And like Dinah said, you know, referencing this sort of 4th industrial revolution, and we know that there is an increasing need for our students when they're leaving school to have greater levels of creativity and innovation, whether it's to solve grand challenges of the world or whether it's to operate in these growing economies. But I mean, even taking, for example, the panel discussion that happened last week at the launch of London Tech Week at local Globe, where there was questions posed around, could King's Cross be the next Palo Alto? And as educators, I think we need to think about what the skills and experiences our students must have in order to operate within these growing industries, both in their local Camden economy and in the wider global economies. And particularly important when we consider the wealth and deprivation that exists alongside each other in Camden. We know that students may have traditionally been successful without this approach to curriculum design, and we can see that in the wealth of organisations that operate in the Knowledge Quarter. But we also know that when we look at the demographic of some of these STEAM organisations, we see a really wide gap, and particularly lots of underrepresentation, whether it's of women or people from economically deprived backgrounds, or BAME. And as educators, we understand the power of the taught curriculum and designing curriculum that narrows this gap and ensures that the access in Camden is for all when they leave our schools. As part of the Camden STEAM Leadership Development Programme, this year we have had 21 Camden schools. We've been working with middle and senior leaders in these schools, looking at the approach to curriculum design to support students to develop these skills. And a big focus of the work that we do is in building employer partnerships and partnerships with the cultural institutions in Camden to enrich the taught curriculum and to provide that context and that authentic challenge that we know students need to engage with. And I wouldn't say it's about raising aspirations, because I think if you come into schools in Camden, you'll see that aspiration is actually very high. But I think broadening aspiration and broadening the knowledge of the career landscape is really, really important. And I think that's particularly important for us to think about curriculum design when we look at the recent exam reforms and on the ever-tightening budgets that schools are facing, the need for that curriculum to remain inclusive. You know, we have the linear exam systems, we have the increased academic demand, and we know that these can potentially widen gaps. And we know that there's data to show, for example, that when you look at students that access careers education in school, it's often not accessed by the vulnerable groups who arguably need that information the most. And so we're looking at bringing that information into the taught curriculum so that there's equity of opportunity and equity in the provision that we have. It's not an optional extra that can then often be offered across the board. I think some of the really exciting work that's come out of the Hub this year, some of the really great employer and school partnerships that we've had Bennett's Architects working with a primary school and with 2 secondary schools, and they were working on projects around sustainable design and sustainable cities. And it's really nice to get that through programme of provision. It's very rare to get people able to work across the full age range. We had Ted Baker work with a fantastic project with a Camden primary school looking at fashion design and sustainable use of materials. And sometimes actually we get employers approaching us who are unsure how they could bring their knowledge to particularly a primary school setting. So I think a really nice example that we had was a data scientist from Eden Smith, who worked with Year 2 students from St Patrick's, and they had been collecting data around rainforests, and the data scientists supported them to visualise their data, and that was a really fantastic project. And I think these projects not only contribute to the academic rigour of the taught curriculum by bringing in expert skills, but they also build that cultural capital and give students that broad knowledge of the work landscape around them. Keir Starmer was talking this morning about the crucial role that businesses are going to play in having being involved, and we would like and encourage more businesses in the Knowledge Quarter to sign up to be STEAM ambassadors. In fact, we've got Danielle Tobin and Lorraine Lawson in the front row here who run the Camden STEAM programme, and will be here in the break if you want to ask them more about how you could be involved and how you could sign up. That would be fantastic. I think some of the outcomes that are particularly exciting at the end of our first year of this programme, we've seen a huge increase in teacher confidence in when they have worked with employers in planning a piece of curriculum, in what they've taken from that expertise. But amazingly, we could measure the impact in teacher knowledge and confidence around that teacher within their schools. So we're already seeing a ripple effect of this knowledge, and that's really exciting when we think about having sustained change in practice in Camden schools from this approach. So yeah, please do sign up.
Thank you, Kate. So that hopefully contextualises today's session and gives you some food for thought. I'm going to turn in a moment to our students. Kate's mentioned this. I would like to, if I may, reframe what Cllr was saying earlier, which is that these guys don't lack aspiration. 1,000 students in my school and Kate's school don't lack aspiration. What they lack, as Kate was saying, is sometimes the opportunity to achieve that aspiration. And it's also our job to help them look beyond that aspiration. So if you can maybe hold that idea in your minds as well. And one thing I've noticed through today is that young people have been referred to an awful lot, which is fantastic. They're part of the discussion, but they've been talked about, but rather than with. So this is our opportunity to have a conversation directly with the people who, however young we might feel, will inherit the Knowledge Quarter from us in the not too distant future. So folks, what are your reflections on what you've heard so far today? Sayra.
I'm going fast. Okay. I think one thing that's been brought up a lot is about representing every demographic possible and like having them all here. But on the first break, I walk out and I realised that I was the only girl here wearing a hijab. And it's like, you want to have this conversation with everyone, but the fact is not everyone can get in the room to have it. And I feel the way we're talking about increasing how we get women into science, how we start getting young people to have a voice, how we start using directional democracy to force people to have these conversations has been something that's kind of like encouraging as someone who wants to have these conversations and see these changes. So the Knowledge Quarter has been great in that aspect, yeah.
Thank you.
What I thought about today was that knowledge is indispensable, and mainly due to the fact that knowledge is so useful that you can use it to arise in any opportunity, become your best self, and see how far you can achieve or how far you can aim for. And because of that, it's been very inspirational today. One of the things I do, for example, in my, as a part-time job, I tutor, and I can see that I can, from today, as of today, I can broaden the idea of knowledge towards our local communities. For example, most of the kids that come in that are being tutored, they're from the local area, and I teach in like the local tutoring service area. And what I can say is that from today I can pass on knowledge that wouldn't be heard as much compared to like adults. So me being a role model of my age. I mean, I'm still young, of course. From hearing it from me, really engages them. And as from like my own experiences, I can say that it has proven that they are learning from what I say, and they are putting that into use. Occasionally we have the banter and all, but it's about mainly the positive aspect that comes from giving knowledge. And there's a lot of things that these kids can do, and that you can see literally like their potential just through talking to them and understanding who they are. So I think one of the key parts today that I've gone through and learned through today is that knowledge is indispensable, but it's no use if you're not spreading it about or engaging yourselves actively with people.
Thank you. Abass.
I found today inspirational, especially the talk at the start with Maggie, and she was talking about how she, even though she suffered from dyslexia, that didn't stop her from achieving her goals. Even though she was a woman, that didn't stop her from trying to become an astronaut, which there's not many women in. And that taught me that you can have whatever goal you want, and you don't need to let other people tell you that you can't do it or you shouldn't be able to do it. You should just do it and try your best. And that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. So I think we've got three key ideas there. We've got one about representation in the conversation, and by that I mean the whole of today and the KQ more broadly. Something really interesting about peer-to-peer learning. So you might be sitting here thinking, great, we can go in and do some workshops in Richard and Kate's schools, but actually what might we be able to do with sixth formers that they could do then with Key Stage 4, Key Stage 3 or primary school children? So maybe we need a different approach to working with young people as well. And something about being inspirational and providing role models, almost, ideas that students can take and turn into their own aspirations and their own ideas for the future. I'm going to turn to Dinah and Kate now. So we've heard a lot about a STEAM approach to learning and a STEAM approach to curriculum across our schools. How do you think that that can democratise knowledge? Kate?
I think, you know, as I was saying before, I think we've seen that students can be successful, very successful, despite a taught curriculum or with one that was perhaps stuck in quite an old-fashioned model of employability, but not all students will be. And when we look at which students aren't successful outside of that, it is those that are more vulnerable to be left behind and to have that wider gap. And I think this is a social justice issue. This is about making sure that schools are providing a platform that all students can access what they need to, so they can leave and be part of the future world of work. And that's how I see the STEAM approach. It's not leaving things to chance.
Dinah?
I think that's a really good way of putting it. I mean, I was talking earlier about the importance of it in terms of actually ensuring that people have got the skill sets that will enable them to thrive going forward. But I think that in a way, you know, sometimes when we all come together and we talk about knowledge and we talk about collaboration and we talk about democratization and we talk about all of these things, all of which are fantastic, there's a way in which we all need to focus on something to make it happen. And so I would say that the work of the STEAM Commission in terms of the organisations in the Knowledge Quarter, the kinds of things they're interested in and live and breathe fits very well with this agenda. This agenda, as well as focusing on STEAM and bringing critically the employers and industries together with the schools in a much more managed way that's allowed for real partnerships to grow rather than individual connections, which is very confusing for everybody to manage, to happen, is bringing benefit not just in relation to the STEAM agenda, as it were, but also in relation to actually thinking about careers, thinking about partnerships, thinking about access, thinking about things on a much broader basis. So it's not just the STEAM piece, it's actually about how do you work more effectively in partnership with the community and schools in terms of spreading all knowledge. So that's why I would suggest it would be a really good idea to all come together, collaborate and focus through this vehicle if you're in Camden, because it's effective and it's important and it's democratising.
Thank you. And from that idea of democratising, there's also, as has been referred to a lot today, the idea of social justice and helping to mitigate some of the ills in society that some of our young people face. So I think that's an idea that we might want to keep current. I'm going to turn to my left and just ask for a quick summary from our students of what sort of knowledge they access at the moment and where. So what helps you get through day-to-day life and study? Labib.
For me, I like reading, and some of that reading comes from like anthologies, poetry, the books and etc. But then occasionally I listen to when I, for example, like music. I don't tend to listen to music I listen to music that has lyricism in it. So I use that, and it helps me with my thinking process, and it does at times help me with my mindset. So those are the sources of knowledge I mainly use. Other than that, I think there's the news, and then watching TV and advising, I guess, from leaflets and But those are the main sources of knowledge that I gain knowledge from.
Thank you. Abass?
The main sources of knowledge for me are, besides textbooks, I would say my parents. Because of them, I'm here today. They help me out every day. They always motivate me, and although I think that they're a pain in the backside, they're there for me all the time, and I'm thankful for them. And yeah.
Thank you. Sayra?
I think a lot of the knowledge I use is instinctual. Like, it's stuff I've just picked up, like how to use your phone. You don't read the manual. You just try and do. How I get to school, how I interact with my family, with my peers. But then a lot of it is very tech-based. So like, I'll go on Twitter to find out what's going on, keep up with the people I know, see if there's anything that's impacting me, like get some info on like movies or whatever. And then, you've got the more traditional senses of you going through your textbooks, you going through leaflets and brochures and stuff you find online to just gain more
Intel.
It's more generalized aspects of knowledge as opposed to the tiny little bits that you just think, oh yeah, that's cool, I remember that for the rest of my life and never use it. So
there's a real mix of types of knowledge that you're accessing: formal, informal, online, offline. Thinking about your time at Regent High School, we've spoken about the importance of partnerships and collaboration. Are there any examples that stick in your minds of projects that you've done before with partners in the KQ and beyond, and why have they stuck in your minds?
Some of, I would say, okay, I think I got two. One, so our school had, in year 11, they had come to our school with an organisation called the National Citizen Service, NCS, and they inspired me, my school inspired me to do it with a bunch of my friends. And that in return gave me a lot of campaigning skills, public speaking skills, the ability to, adapt to situations that are difficult. And we also did a bit of survival. I learned from that. And then I would also say that we had another kind of a project that was it was called the Jack Petchy Speaking
Challenge.
Yeah, Speak Out Challenge, and people were giving. It allowed people in our year to give out to express their thoughts and opinions on something, and then it to be asked and discussed about with all the other people in the year, and that collectively has maybe I would say assembled us as probably a family, and that helped us be more compassionate towards each other and our goals and inspirations.
Thank you. Abass?
Last week we had Futures Week. We had different speakers come into the school, tell us about their careers. We also had the opportunity to go to East London University for a workshop to experience what university life is like. And then we went to Reading, which is a campus university, and then we saw what that's like. And in year 10, we had a poetry workshop, and then all three of us and other students, we had the opportunity to write our own poems, and it got published into a book, which is really cool.
Abass is being a bit shy there. That book sits in the collection of the British Library for posterity, so these folks are published authors. Sayra, anything that sticks in your mind?
When I was younger, in about years 8 to 10, I did quite a lot of work with the British Library, in which they kind of brought us here and they showed us all these poems and we introduced us to poets and authors who were kind of writing about things like their experiences as people that are part of minorities. And I think a lot of that really informed me as a person, because I kind of feel like I've got a kind of duty to go out and try to make life easier for people who are part of minorities. And it's also made me more aware of my own identity. And I feel like if the British Library hadn't come into our school, if they hadn't said that we want to impart this knowledge with you, I feel like I'd be a very different person now.
So some examples there of quite short-term activities like half-an-hour talks last week for Futures Week versus long-running projects. The sense of working with partners writ large almost through the experiences these guys have had. I'm going to turn to you folks now to open up this conversation. Jodie has a mic, so we can hear one another nice and loudly. But you might have a question, you might have something that you want to ask these folks, you might have an idea that you want to share just to continue this debate further. Is there anybody who would like to kick us off?
Ooh, 2. Yay. I'll go up first and then I'll come down.
That's the worst moment of it, where you look and everybody's got their hands
I
up.
need rocky music.
That was
coming
3
up
up.
first.
That's good.
Thank you. I just want to say I've had a chance to sort of speak to a couple of you today, and I just want to say, you know, thank you for coming. It's been really great to have you here, and just the conversations we've had around the tea break, around the biscuits, and in the other workshops. Brilliant. I'd like to ask you all, actually, if you could do this again. Just imagine you're in charge of this. You guys are doing this knowledge call. What would you do differently?
Nice question.
Have more kids in the room.
Yeah, I would say that as well.
Add more kids.
Have more kids in the
young
room.
people.
Simply
Why?
because, like, we're going to, as you said, be inheriting this knowledge, and more than that, we're going to be expected to be passing it forward, adding to it, expanding as we go. And I feel like if we're here from a young age, if we've got some sense of connection to it, we'd be more likely to do it, as opposed to just finding out about it when we end up in the world of work and be like, yeah, okay, maybe I'll check it out.
Labib?
I found today kind of perfect, to be honest. But maybe have more people talk about projects active projects they've brought in, or for like, I don't know, people in like lower backgrounds or low communities, and with that thought process, allow us to maybe work on something as well. So then bringing us into maybe their projects that they've done, and then allowing us to think in ways on how to better it.
Abass?
I would say more interactive talking with the audience to make them engaged as well, instead of just sitting and listening. Yeah.
Do you want me to ask these folks as well, Sandra? Do you want me to ask? Yeah. Dinah?
Oh, the latter.
Kate?
Yeah, I think the students' insights there, I think, you know, the more that we can engage with young people in their views and show them what is available and what's here and what it looks like, and allow that discussion and dialogue, the better.
Wouldn't it be fascinating if they outnumbered people who were older than 18? Yeah. There we go, Jodie, an idea for next year.
Well, you heard it here first. We are launching our strategy this evening. One of the things that we've outlined in our strategy is that, and this is for you guys to think about, that we want to appoint a knowledge call to youth champion. So that's one of the ways in which we hope to get the youth more involved in the KQ as an organisation, but the KQ as a wider group of organisations as well. Anyway, you don't want to hear from me.
There's one here and then one up at the top.
Hi. No, I just wanted to say, really, you're quite a breath of fresh air hearing you talk. I think this morning I found it very enjoyable, but my head was pounding. And as a mum of 2 quite small children, I think you've given me a bit of hope about the future, I must say, because it can get quite bleak, and that you're not afraid to speak, bring yourselves here almost. You're not kind of talking, copying or talking or anything like that. I'm quite interested in STEAM because it's totally new to me. Is it just Camden? And is it something that is being rolled out across the UK? And how are your findings then going to affect the national curriculum generally, I suppose? Because I know you're an academy. I don't understand masses about kind of the education system. But what are kind of the long-term changes that might happen?
I think STEAM, or the combination of the importance of combining interdisciplinary subjects in the way that I was describing, lives and breathes in a number of ways, in terms of people looking at it, people making recommendations around it, people thinking about it. The future of work and the future of education. So, for example, a member of the Knowledge Quarter, I think, is the Arts Council, and the Durham Commission, which is their partnership with Durham University, looking at exactly this area, will be coming out with its recommendations in the autumn. So I think, it's a very live debate. Camden isn't the only place that's looking at STEAM, the importance of STEAM. It's talked about a lot. In practical terms, there are other examples. Birmingham City University, for example, has a whole kind of STEAM house, I think they call it, which is an incubator for small businesses. Quite often, people are coming out of the university. But I think what Camden is doing, which is really important, is that the whole schools area has been a long-running kind of debate about the changes, about the EBAC, about the creative subjects not being in the EBAC, about, therefore, is that driving creativity down in the curriculum, the separation of subjects and so on. So there's been a lot of debate about that, a lot of lobbying about it. What there's been less about is actually practical examples of people working on something which is actually demonstrating a change agenda and demonstrating the impact of that. And Camden is a trailblazer in that. And as I say, it's a whole number of schools within Camden and employers. So I think it's positive, because I spend a lot of my bloody life and I've spent years on strategy and policy, and that's why I live in Camden, and I find this work really rewarding, because it's one of the only areas where I can actually see positive change, positive impact, and a positive address to the future happening. So, sorry, I talk too much then. Always do. I'm going to be quiet now.
I'm going to add about the national curriculum and how this could be rolled out wider than Camden in schools, because I think what the national curriculum gives us is, perhaps the what that might be included, but I think the STEAM is more about the how, and actually for once I think Ofsted is perhaps aligning with us here, because their focus is all about the implementation of your curriculum and it being appropriate for the cohorts in front of you and about having the appropriate context with what you're teaching. So actually I think there's some encouragement there for schools to be looking at their curriculum, and this approach, it works perfectly in making sure that it's a curriculum that meets the needs of the children in schools.
I think that's right. That whole Ofsted broad and balanced curriculum now is, for those of us who are interested in policy wonkness, as it were, is hopeful. And I think we can say that Torriano Primary, which is one of the hub schools, achieved outstanding in its recent Ofsted review, and a large part of that was their address to STEAM. And the other hot news is Rory, as we now like to call him, is there today, isn't he, Danielle? Looking at Rory Stewart's there, looking at their work and what they're doing.
I think that's
with
almost
interest. Yeah.
Sorry. I have one other question. Sorry. Hi. Thank you, everyone. Sorry.
I'm just going to say it's a call to action, because, as Kate's saying, our curricula have to match the cohorts in front of us and the area that we represent. So, folks, you're all in the area known as Camden and maybe slightly beyond into Islington, but we want you to be involved, because if we're not preparing people for the industries that you represent, the companies that you are from, we're not going to do very well by these guys, and Ofsted will judge us accordingly. So there's plenty of scope for conversation that might have been a bit more difficult up to now, but from September, I wouldn't be surprised if you're getting lots and lots of phone calls and emails from schools saying, please get involved. Sorry.
I'm so sorry to cut you off. I didn't mean to do that at all. Just one other question. Thank you, everyone. I think it was particularly useful to hear from you guys today, and in particular the examples of collaboration that have impacted you recently, as well as where you're getting your knowledge from. And I think that's given us quite a direct idea, rather than kind of these broad and quite big concepts that we're talking about today. It's been really good to hear from you. My question is in relation to where you get your knowledge, these examples of collaboration, how might them happening within your schools as opposed to getting out and maybe coming to an institution like today, how that might impact you? So the space itself, if that makes sense.
I feel like if we've got institutions coming to our schools, it makes it a lot more real, because right now the Knowledge Quarter is just kind of a concept for us. But if we have the different universities, the different cultural centres or whatnot coming in, then it's something to give us a very physical connection, and it's something that makes us a bit more willing to take advantage of all that we've got lying on our doorstep. So like, if you guys want to come in, feel free to talk to Ms. Harrison about that one.
Labib?
I would say, personally, I would say the institutions that have come in, for example, as of last week, was extremely useful. For example, Jodie from the Knowledge Quarter, she had come in and she talked about how knowledge is in general, and she offers opportunities for students in Camden and local communities and how it is. I personally took it upon myself that I wanted to ask her what she could do. So in my spare time, I like writing, like for example, poetry or creative writing. And I asked her immediately. I seized the opportunity to ask what she can do. And she gave me an email instantly. And I've been getting emails from, it's called Poet in the City. I've received emails from it, and it's a really good program for to put on your UCAS application. And in terms of volunteering, they can help you out a lot. So I would say that bring these companies and people that come in, and I forgot the name of the word, that come in to schools and engage actively with the young people. Surely there's going to be a group of some people that are going to wanting to seize the opportunity. But I think one of the problems that we have to tackle with this is that when people come in, companies, corporations, to talk about whatever they're talking about, sometimes students may want to, they feel their voice is limited because of their environment or what they're, who they're with, their friends, etc. They feel like, they have to be silenced, etc. Whereas it shouldn't be. It shouldn't ever be the case. So I think that what we could do to help with that is that, Jodie gave me her card, and I think it's just good to have a basis or fundamental source after that you can go straight away to. And perhaps in terms of communication, you could maybe I chased after Jodie after that session. And then I seized her, but she could have been gone. And if I hadn't, I don't think if I had got the opportunity, I don't know what I would have done. But now that I think about it, I could have, perhaps at home you can bring about they brought their own card. Why don't you make your own card? Why don't students make their own card and have a program, or maybe once a year or something, where they can make something as such of that, and it should help. That's what I think would do. That's what I think is a really good option to have.
Thank you. Abass?
I think it's better if the institutions come to the schools instead of the students going to the institutions, because then it shows that they care, and that's all students want to know. They want to know that they matter. They want to know that people are interested in helping them with their futures.
Thank you. Another question at the back, I think.
Hi there, guys. Young and not so young. I love the points. I love the points made about sort of representation and more young people being here. And Abass, you just said about the institutions going to the schools, maybe, and the colleges. but earlier on we heard about more young people being here, and you guys are all from sixth form. Maybe a certain type of learner, a certain type of aspiration. What about the people who find it harder to engage with education? What would you do, say your peers, what would you do to engage them, get them more involved? The ones we've been talking about today who perhaps need a bit more help?
I think we have a very straight-laced idea of education in that we think it's sitting down, learning something, writing it, and just throwing it back up. But if we can make it more visual, interactive, less academic, no offense to anyone in here, if we can make it less academic and more something that can be enjoyed and can be enjoyable, then I think that just boosts interest massively, simply because it's something that seems more fun as opposed to something you have to do, something that's government mandated or something.
Kind of to add on to Sayra's idea, maybe ask them individually about what, if they have any keen interests, or if not, obviously you can ask them what is it you'd like to build interest on, and then try and, I don't know, assemble it and make it and turn it into probably a passion. And with that passion, they can, I would say, they can use that no matter what, just to go far in life. But it's all about, I guess, these people, I'm no offense, but they probably don't have an idea that they want to do, as compared to like other kids. Like they could easily get into anything they have more interests, whereas they don't. And it is a huge responsibility to help them build those interests up, because we don't want everyone else to all have keen interest to rise and keep going above, whereas we're leaving them behind. And it's just important to engage with them. So engagement is really important, essentially, and that's what I think needs to happen. Find their interests, hopefully help them weave a passion, and I don't know, that's about it. Build their nests.
I think we should show these students that there's more to life than just school. Maybe like give them examples of some people that maybe took a different route and where it took them, so then they can be inspired. Then they don't need to feel pressure from their teachers, their parents. They can just do what they're passionate about and know that they can achieve what they want.
I'm almost sensing that we're suggesting a citizens' assembly across the Camden schools to understand directly from students what they want, because it's one thing for Kate and I to speak on their behalf. We get it wrong, even though we're with them all day. I think what the three on my left have suggested really is that we ask directly, and that we hear their voice through planning as well as through delivery, and that we then fire that out to you and say, right, this is what folks are looking for, how can you respond? So I think you've possibly given us a piece of work there to look at through the next academic year. I think we might have time for one more question if there is one. I think way has just been given to the lady in the middle.
Here we go. I'm Hazel Patterson from the Christian Science Church, and I'm going to throw a ball in here because I think we've got onto it a little bit with this link between, if you like, formal and non-formal education. You know, because the non-formal aspects of education presumably are really important in developing the attitudes that are needed for young people to use knowledge to advance, and especially to have vision. And my question is, do you feel that you have been supported enough in as it were, working out the big questions like who am I, why am I here, and this kind of thing, which are the, you know, in a way, these are the things which come from my sector, the church sector, but I'm very interested to hear whether you feel that this has been sufficiently represented in your education, because I know that schools are inspected on whether they support the spiritual aspect of life, which can be so important in the demands that are put on you these days.
So a question about spirituality and almost philosophy. Have we allowed you to explore different philosophical approaches and spiritual approaches to the world? Abass?
I would say that we have a lot of opportunities, and that's thanks to Mr. Harrison. He's always running around. He's always running around thinking of new ways that are easier for us to engage with school. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I didn't ask it. Thank you.
I'd say with all these opportunities that arise from that Ms. Harrison bring in, they put out a kind of belief at the end, or a message at the end, or moral a message at the end. And I guess in terms of our spirituality, that helps us. And it's always been, I would say, a positive image, even if we neglect it, or we don't learn more or intake more information about it. I would say essentially we do end up with more positive information, and I think that because of that positive information, that equates to our better spiritual selves.
In terms of like, why are we here? Who do we want to be? Who are we? I think spiritually and philosophically, that's an ongoing question, because we're in such a crucial part of our academic careers and we're still learning in that. But I do feel like Regent's High has made it so much easier for us to come to understand what we find passion and interest in, because we have so many opportunities and links. And I've been on trips this entire week because my teachers are trying to help me find those links. And even for something as simple as required practicals in biology, they will take you on trips to partners and they will help you make it interesting and interactive. And I feel like we've got those links and they're definitely helping, but it's an ongoing question that will be ongoing for quite a while, I think. But yeah.
And I think there's a strong moral and ethical imperative behind the work of the STEAM Commission and the way that we're delivering the hub. So I think that is coming through in what we're doing, the conversations we're having with schools. Would either of you like to add anything on that?
No, I think, we try and draw on context when we think about designing curriculum pieces and looking at what students are passionate about. And we know that social justice and the challenges of the world are areas that students are always keen to look at and examine. And so they often form, the centre of a curriculum piece and design piece. And we see that from primary through all the way up to FE. So I think in that way, it's, it's sort of underpinning a lot of the work the schools are doing.
Thank you. We're going to recap now because we're coming to a close. So I'm going to ask each member of the panel to give you a message. What's their message for the Knowledge Quarter, which will most likely pick up on some of the things that we've been saying, but we know that memories are not always what they should be, so hopefully these last few minutes will mean that you've got something that you can take away and enact so that we can be even better at STEAM learning and sharing and disseminating knowledge. So I think I'm going to start with Kate and Dinah, and then we'll come to Labib, Abass and Sayra in a moment. So Kate, what's your message for the assembled audience and beyond?
Yeah, I would say please offer the time that you have, any time that you can spare to work with schools. It can be a really small standalone piece, and it can be an extended project. Whatever time you have available, please share your expertise and your knowledge and the journey that you've taken to get where you are with our students, so they can see the breadth of routes that people can take, that there isn't this one direction that they need to follow, that you can end up in a huge breadth of jobs.
Thank you. Dinah?
So I've reflected on the point about people having to listen to people talking, and whether or not we've articulated well enough what STEAM is and how it's important to make it interactive and visible and interesting. And so my action for all of you, my request to all of you, is if you want to learn more about that, on July the 10th at Central St Martin's, we have the STEAM exhibition of all the work that's been taking place across the 21 schools that have been involved in this first year of piloting this cross-curricular interdisciplinary approach. There'll be young people there, there'll be students there, there'll be teachers there, there'll be employers there, there'll be everybody that moves there, steaming away. And if you want to come and join us, then basically the link is... On Twitter. Oh yes, an interactive form of communication. Please join us.
And do speak to Danielle and Lorraine. Could you give everyone a wave? During the break as well.
And can I just say as well, thank you so much to all of you, to Kate, to Richard, obviously to you guys, but genuinely also to the Camden Council people here. There's been so many people working so hard to collaborate on this, and the heavy lifting and the work that's been done has been phenomenal in these 2 years. So I just want to take this moment to recognise that, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Abass, what's your message?
First, I want to say thank you to the whole audience for listening to us. And my message is I want you guys to take on what we've said on this panel. And I hope that knowledge can be spread, not just in Camden, but to London and other parts of the country and also the world as well.
Thank you.
I also want to say thank you for allowing me to come here today and speak about our topics and issues. A message I would say is probably help us, I know it's going to sound ridiculous, but help us become a spider. By that, I mean help us weave our passions and interests. And by doing that, by saying that, I mean bringing more opportunities, like as of Futures Week that we had last week. It was really good, and it helped me understand what I really want to do. By doing so, we can pretend that we have like a future plan, a nest, and then what do spiders make? A web, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, but somewhere to be stable and have an aim that is stable and can keep growing, essentially.
Thank you, Sayra.
I think I'd tell you guys that the hardest thing to do is to get us in the room, to get us to pay attention and care enough, and that if you can come away to do that, to get us there, to get us listening and watching and hearing, then you've basically done like, what, a third of the job? You're like 33% of the way there. And I feel like you guys have given us so much opportunity and there's so much potential, and it's that something we're really grateful for and something that I personally feel like we're really looking forward to actually harnessing and using. So thank you for that.
Folks, that brings us to a close. I'd like to finish by thanking you for joining us today, because you did have choice, although I now realise I'm sounding like an airline pilot. But thank you. Thank you for coming and being part of this conversation, and let this conversation continue. Huge thanks to Kate for being on our panel today. A round of applause for Kate.